Hey mathematicians, today's topic is going to be multiplying integers. Your goal at the end of this lesson is to be able to answer the question, how does the sign of factors affect their products? So let's go just to generalize multiplication for a second. Remember, multiplication is just repeated addition. So that's how we don't have to keep adding. We use multiplication for that instead. So here's a scenario. While playing a board game, Mrs. Kibler unluckily has to move backwards 2 spaces 3 turns in a row. Backwards 2 spaces would be a -2. So think about -2, and then another -2, and then another -2. So in multiplication, we could write this as -2 times 3. And you can see that we end up at -6. So here's another scenario. A ball drops 100 feet in elevation each minute for 4 minutes. Dropping 100 feet is going to be a -100. And this is going to happen 4 times in a row. So -100, and then another -100, another one, and another one. We are going to end up at -400. As a multiplication problem, we could write this as -100 times 4 gives me -400. So let's generalize here. Multiplication of integers. When you have a positive number and you multiply it by a negative number, your answer is negative. But what happens when you multiply a negative number times a negative number? Let's dig into this. Let's take -2 times -4. I can break this down to -1 times 2. I can break this down to -1 times 4. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these -1s and I'm going to put them next to each other. -1 times -1. I still have my 2, and I still have my 4. I want to talk about this right here for a minute. A negative. When we take a negative times a negative, what happens? It becomes positive. So this becomes +1 right here. I still have my 2. I still have my 4. So my answer is 8. 2 negatives multiplied together, those negatives cancel out and it gives you a positive number. So let's talk about this one, -7 times -2. Again, I can take out my -1 times 7, -1 times 2. Again, I'm going to just rearrange here. I'm going to take my -1s. This is the commutative property. It says I can do this. Now I'm going to take my 7 and my 2. Negative times a negative becomes a +1. So my answer is 14. So let's generalize, review. Multiplication of integers, a positive times a negative. That's when we were I was moving back 2 spaces 3 times in a row. -2 times 3 is going to be a negative number. When you multiply a negative times a negative, it becomes positive.